to Outrage Astrology. My name's Mike.
I'm Brittany.
And we talk about tons of fun astrological topics, so we might piss you off, but pay a little attention, you might learn a little something, hopefully.
Yeah, in fact, we pissed each other off so bad that we're now re-recording this podcast.
Because we got into an argument at the middle of it. Okay, so what are we talking about today, Brittany?
We're talking about chart types and aspect patterns.
Yes. So whenever you're taking a look at a natal chart, you're going to want to break down all the individual placements, like the sign placements, like, ooh, I'm a Leo moon, or ooh, I'm a, rising Virgo. But at the same time, as you get better at reading natal charts, you'll start to understand the importance of looking at everything as a whole. The details are important, but the big picture is important too, because all those little placements, they make up the individual as a whole. People are very complex, but at the end of the day, we're one walking, talking, sentient being that's made up of many parts. So to see the big picture, and you can usually do that through aspect patterns and chart types, is going to give you a lot of insight onto an individual and how they operate as a whole.
Right. So you're going to be looking for themes for a person. A lot of times people will say, oh, I looked at my chart and this contradicts this. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, you want to be paying close attention to what the aspects are being made, what the placement is, because you may be very extroverted in your work environment. You may be very private or more introverted in your personal relationships. So you can be different ways in different aspects of your life. But if you just pull up, well, what does, the Venus in Sagittarius mean? Well, if you don't look at what that means according to that house, it can give you a different flavor. So just keep that in mind. That's why you may see contradictions. But we are looking at themes. So the first thing that we're going to look at is you're talking about quadrants. So break up the quadrants for us, Mike.
So a natal chart is a circle. Obviously, it's a 360-degree circle, and it can be broken up into 4 quadrants: the bottom left, bottom right, top left, or top right, and top left. So it starts at the ascendant, which is all the way to the very left side of the chart in the center, and then that's the start of the first house. The first, the second, and the third house relates to you specifically as a person, like your body, your values, the shit coming out of your mouth. That's the third house, your communication. And then when you go over to the second quadrant, that's more of like how you, in a private way, relate to others in your environment. That's your family, the fourth house. That's your children, creativity, the changes you make to your environment. That's the fifth house. The sixth house is your daily habits, the things that keep both you healthy, your pets healthy, and your house healthy. Then you move up. You see the descendant, that's the cusp of the seventh house. And then the seventh, eighth, and ninth pertains to relationships, your interpersonal relationships. And that's going to be, your relationships, the eighth house, the intimacy, shared resources, sex, taxes, blah, blah, blah. And the ninth house, spirituality, and how you incorporate everything up to that point with your relationship with God, which is a very personal relationship. And then you go over to the last quadrant, which is the 10th, 11th, 12th house. And that is your relationship with society as a whole. The changes you make on the world that benefit greater good, collective unconscious, hopes and dreams for society. That's all the third or the fourth quadrant of the chart. So to see where you have the most clusters of planets, what quadrant or what half, the top half, the bottom half, the right half, the left half, or just one of the quadrants, is going to show you where most of the energy in your life is exerted.
Yeah,
right?
so and a really easy way to get this, to look at this, to see it clearly, is if you pull up the house system Placidus when you're looking at it, because it's going to show you the really thick dark lines running right to left and up and down, and that's going to split those up easy for you. So everything that's on the top half of the chart above that horizontal line is, we'll probably in this episode, we'll probably say above the horizon, but that is the southern hemisphere of the chart. Everything that is below that horizontal line is the northern hemisphere. I know that seems backwards, but you have to realize it's not just how you're looking at it on the screen, it's what's happening in the sky.
Yeah.
And so then
everything. For instance, if like the sun is on the bottom half of the chart, then you know that person was born at night because the sun is below the horizon, and if the sun's on the top part of the chart, that means they were born during the day.
Right. So then on everything on the vertical line that runs up and down, everything that's on the left of that is the eastern horizon. So if you see the sun very close to the ascendant, they were born early in the morning. And everything that's on the right side is the Western Hemisphere, and it is somebody who's going to be born later in the afternoon, evening.
Yep.
So you can very easily see how somebody is oriented if they have most of their planets on one of these specific hemispheres. So if they're very southern hemisphere heavy, they're probably going to be very extroverted, oriented towards learning, work, kind of going out into the world and being like, here I am.
So what you're saying is if the planets are all on the top half of the chart.
The top half of the chart, yes.
Like
the southern hemisphere is the top half. So the bottom hemisphere, if you see a lot, or sorry, the northern hemisphere, the bottom of the chart, if you see a lot of planets down there, you're going to be looking at somebody who is, they can be more private, but they're going to be more self-analytical, more introspective, more focused on what's going on inside them, as opposed to
Ted Bundy's chart had most of the planets on the bottom half.
Yeah, I know you pointed out in our when we pissed each other off in our last episode.
Yeah, because most of your planets are sitting right around there too.
Yeah.
She kills people.
We have very different charts, Ted Bundy and I. Okay, I'm sure. So if you see a lot of the planets over on the left side, on that eastern section of the chart, you're going to see somebody who's much more independent. And if they are on the right side, like Mike, you're going to see somebody who really likes people, relationships.
Good. I thought you were going to say dependent, and I was
very, very codependent and clingy. No, Mike's not at all, because he's got a lot of, Sagittarius for is hanging out in his 7th house, and it's definitely not a dependent thing. But anyway, so that's kind of how that works when you're looking at it. You have a splatter chart. You want to bring that up, Mike?
Well, splatter charts are a little interesting to me because I've seen it go many different ways. But for the most part, what a splatter chart is you've got planets all over that chart, like all over that bitch. There's not a cluster of planets hanging out in any specific quadrant or side. And usually each planet is making a ton of aspects to other planets. And it can show a lot of really scattered energy. I've seen some really dysfunctional, crazy people that have splatter charts, but I've also seen there's also some really successful people that have them too. They're difficult. They're very difficult charts to have.
Yeah, when we get into the Grand Cross, which is very typical. No, I shouldn't say very typical, but that happens when you have a splatter chart. You see a Grand Cross. We're going to get into more of how that functions, how you can see it go both ways.
Yep.
So, we kind of laid groundwork about stelliums in our last episode. Like I told you before, you actually taught me something or gave me something to think on when we talked about stelliums, because I have always looked at stelliums as being 4 or more planets in one sign or house. But you brought up that it's not a true stellium unless it has 3 personal planets involved in it.
Yes.
And I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because I see how my stellium that has a ton of personal planets functions very differently from your stellium that has a lot of generational planets.
Yes, it does. When you have a lot of personal planets in the stellium, see, personal planets, you feel those energies much more intensely. They're much more identifiable energies, and they're more conscious. And so when you have 3 or more personal planets, and it's usually the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, but it can be switched up in many different ways, in one house, then you're seeing a lot of focus of the conscious mind on a particular area of life. Generational planets like Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they're generational. So if you have a personal planet or 2 thrown up into that generational stellium that ties you into the kind of ebbs and flows of your generation, but it's not necessarily a true stellium, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with that. I do see how now that you mention that they function very, very differently. So another thing that we kind of got into a little bit last time was the grand trine, and we need to talk about it again just because it's going to lay the groundwork for when we go into the kite aspect pattern. So tell us about a grand trine.
A grand trine is three planets that are usually in the same element that are each forming a 120-degree aspect to each other. So it's three planets that are, through aspects, making a big blue triangle in your chart.
Yes.
And it's
And what do you get? Yeah, what do you get with a grand trine?
you have three planets that are effortlessly sharing traits and energies with each other. And it can be really cool and really beneficial, or it can be really evil. It just depends on the planets involved. Because, like, imagine if the grand trine is because trine.
Imagine if what?
Yeah, imagine if the grand trine is composed of three malefic planets. Let's say Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. Well, that might not be the best because that's, brutality and ego drive and Plutonic things and Saturn things. And Saturn's not a very compassionate planet. It kind of all mixed together. So that can make for a really fucked up person. But let's say you see like the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter all in a grand trine, then that can make for a wonderfully social and just effortlessly easy to relate to people type of personality. Very sweet. So it just depends on the planets involved. But it's pretty cool little aspect. It just depends on which planets and the houses.
Some people get really excited about a grand trine. Just realize that it is a super common aspect, and it's not it's not always like Mike was saying, it's not always just this most amazing thing. It can be helpful, but if you just have like a shitload of grand trines in your chart, I talked about this last time. This is like the trust fund baby that doesn't have to work for anything. So
doesn't have to try really hard. A lot of times there's a sense of entitlement.
Yeah, it creates laziness. So just having a grand trine in your chart is fine, depending on the planets, like you mentioned. But don't go thinking that like, oh, I have two grand trines and aren't I the most like wonderful thing in the fucking world? No, you're not. You're a pain in the ass, is what you are.
No, everybody's just jealous of you.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody's just jealous of how awesome I am. Okay, but what is kind of cool is when you get into a kite pattern. So a kite pattern is where you have a grand trine, and then it's kind of a hard thing to describe, I think, but the points of a chart form a grand trine with an opposition going down the middle, and two of them are making a sextile to a fourth point.
So it looks like a kite.
It looks like a kite. It adds a dynamic kind of, it adds just as much enough challenge and tension to release the energy of a grand trine into this successful realization of ability. Okay. So I've got a really great example of a kite that I want to like kind of go over with you guys to show you how they function. And I'd like to give examples on most of these. You think we can do that, Mike, so we can kind of show how they function?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So my grandfather has a kite, and I'm trying to look at it now. Hold on, pull it up here. Yeah. So he has this kite. It is involving, the opposition is between Neptune and Mercury, which is kind of a little bit tough, but it also gives him a lot of compassion, I think. And then he's got let's see, Mars in the 6th, Jupiter conjunct Uranus in the 9th. Saturn's hanging out in there too, and that's forming the grand trine with Neptune in the 1st, and then he's got that big opposition going down there. So I'm probably not describing it very well, but I'll kind of you've got the idea of what planets are in play here. And what this does for him is he actually has a ministry in Africa that he's done for like 15, 20 years now. Even though he's in his late 70s, he goes over there all the time, and he's actually saved like a ton of women from like female circumcision by putting new practices in place there. He's fed a bunch of people who are, when there's the drought in Kenya. This has made him it's helped him take his beliefs and his compassion and his drives and release them into practical action. So that's how a kite is going to work.
It's funny you bring up circumcision.
Let's not say we did. Okay. I got roasted on Reddit the other day. We're not going to get into it. Mike had to get angry with me so that I could be calm. He had to help me through my hard times there.
Well, I mean,
we said we weren't going to get
say what you will about circumcision. I'm not for or against it. I mean, I'm circumcised, but
now everybody knows.
Mystery's gone. But I mean, there are literally why are people so fixated on male circumcision? There are women in Africa that are literally getting their labias chopped off, and nobody's talking about it. And yet they want to get all worried about male circumcision. Never mind. But you know what?
Basically, yeah, I got torn a new one on Reddit because somebody said that everybody who's circumcised their kid should be publicly shamed. And I jumped in there and I said, look, I did all the research. I didn't want to do it, but I went ahead and circumcised my son because every male and female really, but everybody told me he's going to get bullied and this is just what we've all done. And every guy I know is like, yeah, I'm really glad that I had it done. So I went ahead and did it. And I now at this point in time, I kind of wish I hadn't, but I mean, I tried to let that go.
Yeah, because I totally remember running through the schoolyard, pulling other kids' pants down so I could laugh at them for their uncircumcised people.
So there is a group of women in this world who feel that it is their duty to tell every parent that has circumcised their child that they amputated part of their kid's body and that they mutilated them and that they're monsters, and that is pretty much what this lady did to me. And I got her fucking banned from that subreddit because she was a bitch. So you know what? She's probably totally got that's some Pluto shit going on right there. Mm-hmm. She's obsessed about something. Okay, we're going to move right on. I don't even know why you had to bring that up again. You just put me in a pissy mood. Now you're going to have to talk me down again, Mike.
Okay, so T-squares.
Woohoo!
So a T-square. The T in a T-square stands for...
an opposition with two squares.
No, it stands for talent.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Whatever. It stands for it because it looks like a T. It looks like a letter T.
No, it looks like anyway. Okay, so a T-square is a difficult aspect pattern. It is two planets that are forming an opposition to each other, which is hard. But then in turn, there is another planet, a third planet, that is 90 degrees away from each planet that is forming the opposition. So it forms a little triangle, a red one. And a T-square is really difficult because it's three planets that are basically in constant conflict with each other. Three parts of the personality that are in constant conflict with each other. It's difficult, but the thing about those challenging aspects, and the reason they call it a talent square, is because it creates issues within the personality that are so noticeable on the inside and the out that the person actually tends to actively work on those challenges and turns them into strengths over time. And so hence it's called a talent square, because it represents an opportunity for growth. albeit it's difficult, very difficult. A lot of really, really, really bad people have T-squares.
Yeah,
Charles Manson had a T-square, actually.
Here we go. This is the thing about T-squares and why I don't like them as much as grand crosses, which we'll get on into in a minute, is because they are inherently imbalanced. If you think about a chair, if a chair has 3 legs, then it is going to rock and it's not going to be as stable. And if you have a grand cross, it's more stabilizing. That's the way that I look at it. So I've often, whenever I look at a T-square in a chart, I always look at where is the missing point. If it were a grand cross, where would the other point be?
Yeah, and focus on that area of the chart to break the tension of the T-square.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's your solution when you have a T-square, is to look at that point. So not every T-square or grand cross is going to be all in cardinal. They can be out of element, out of quadruplicity, which means, help me, Mike. My explanations are shitty today.
So, like, let's say one of the planets is on the cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius.
Yeah.
But it's on the Scorpio. It's on the Sagittarius side, but it's pretty close to Scorpio. But it's still making the 180-degree aspect to another planet, and then it's still making a 90-degree aspect to another planet, but it's out of sign.
Yeah. So those are still T-squares, but they're going to be the effect is going to be a little bit weakened than if it were all cardinal. Like a cardinal T-square, they're more impatient, but they're initiating. They'll get stuff started, but they're more impatient with it. Like a fixed T-square is very like persevering, but they're stubborn and they're going to hold on to stuff, like hold on to whatever their problem or their issue is. And then these mutable T-squares are going to produce more like a restlessness, and they might change their minds a lot, but they're very flexible. So when they're out of that modality of cardinal or fixed or mutable, it's going to weaken that effect a little bit.
Yes, which is a plus or a negative. It's a positive or a hindrance. Just depends on how you view it.
Yeah, and then the whole picture of the chart, right?
Now, there's 3 planets forming a T-square. And imagine, however, if you were to add the 4th planet, and so you would have 4 planets all making squares to each other, and then making oppositions as well. So it looks like a big giant X. It's a squared out box.
Yeah.
An X'd out box. Yeah, it's called a grand cross.
Yep. So I really liked the grand cross, even though it can be very problematic.
It can be. Explain.
So a grand cross, like I said before, it is more inherently stable than a T-square because they don't have that missing leg of the chair where you have to find that point and release that energy. It's already there in the chart. But here's the thing, there's so much pressure and internal tension in a grand cross that there are 2 things that are going to happen with these individuals. They are either going to break or they are going to fly.
Yeah, all that pressure can create a diamond.
Mm-hmm. So like I was saying, and this is something that I've looked into a lot because
life tends to be very, very hard for those people, but it builds this sense of adversity and perseverance that it can make them very capable individuals. Michael Jordan has a grand cross.
Yeah, that's something you need to realize is these people with these really difficult aspect patterns, there are some amazingly successful people that have them.
And they had to scratch and claw and fight their entire lives to realize those dreams, but they do it.
Yeah. So the same concept, you're going to have, usually a like cardinal or fixed or mutable, grand cross, but they can be slightly out of modality. So like my eldest daughter has one. Her orbs are quite tight, but it is out of modality. They're all just what will happen is the planets will be in very early or very late degrees, and so they're just gonna tip
They're
it.
still making the conversation, but they're not making as fluid of a conversation as if they were in the same modality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these people, something you'll notice about them is they will attempt to resolve one area of their life and it'll put stress on the other one. That is their constant struggle. So like, they may try to fix work and be working really hard, and then it's going to be at the expense of their relationships. Balance is really hard for them to achieve, but once they get into that flow, they master it. They have really strong ideals, and they tend to seek challenges and not back away from them. Something that I see in my oldest daughter is like she is an anxious personality, but she will push herself, even though I know inside and sometimes outside, because she's very vocal, she won't want to do the shit. But she knows that inherently, because of her Grand Cross, that she's got to push it. So like I took her on a trip to Colorado, and they had a tarantula that you could hold, right? And she's 8. And she was the first one that wanted to hold it, but she was like, it wasn't that she just wanted to do it, like, oh, I want to hold the she was like, oh, but in her head, she's like, I've got to get over this. I've got to do this. I've got to get over it. So she was like the first one to do it. And then like with skiing, we had to get the fucking snow patrol to get her down off the mountain in a sled because she couldn't stand up. Most kids would be done after that. They're like, it's cold, it's snowing, I don't like it, I can't stand up. But no, she was like, nope, we'll go over here to these easier ones, and I want to keep learning. And then she was so proud of herself because she got it. That is the kind of creating a diamond that we see in Grand Cross personalities.
Yeah. So she's probably going to be quite successful later on in life.
Yes. Well, she's got we'll have to talk about her Grand Cross sometime, you and me, Mike. It's pretty, I think we have some, but it's a pretty cool one. So
now her brother, on the other hand.
Bless him. Bless him.
Woof.
I mean, he's the cutest damn thing in the world, but he's probably going to rob banks. We don't know. So you want to talk about your special aspect pattern?
Oh God, I love this aspect pattern.
It's got the dumbest name in the world.
I know. In fact, when I start explaining astrology to people, and I talk about my own chart, and I talk about myself a lot, I try to leave this name out of it. Because, I have a mystic rectangle.
You could just call it a rectangle.
But it doesn't have the zing of mystic rectangle.
He's got a magic fairy Fraggle Rock rectangle.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, so mystic rectangle is two planets that are, or no, there's 4 planets. 4 planets make up a mystic rectangle. So it's 2 planets that are forming an opposition, and it's 4 planets, and they're each forming oppositions to each other. But then those 2 oppositions are being, how do I explain it?
Okay, I mean, you've got one. Pull up your chart. Pull up your magical.
All right, so in my
Fraggle Rock chart.
In my mystic rectangle, I've got the moon forming a sextile to the ascendant. That's the bottom part of it. And then at the top part of it, I've got Saturn forming a sextile to Mercury. So that's the top half of it. So Saturn and the moon are in opposition. Mercury and the ascendant are in opposition. And then Saturn's forming a trine to the ascendant, and Mercury's forming a trine to the moon, which is forming the outer walls of the rectangle. So it's a blue rectangle that's formed with 2 trines, 2 sextiles, and then there's 2 oppositions crossing the center of the rectangle.
Right. So simply put, it's comprised, like you said, comprised of 2 opposition aspects. They're connected with 2 trine and 2 sextiles. So it's going to look like a rectangle in the chart, a blue rectangle with an X in the middle.
Yeah, a red X.
Red X, yeah.
Oppositions in general are really difficult to deal with aspects. They're just not fun. They're not easy. But when you have a mystic rectangle, the oppositions are softened up by all of the positive aspects that are being made to those oppositions. So you learn how do I put it? You learn the lessons of the challenging aspects quicker, and you incorporate them more wholly into your personality early on. So it creates a relatively talented individual. A lot of times later on in life, it's just picking up talents is easy for them, but it also creates enough tension for them to want to work on developing those talents. It's not like having a grand trine or anything like that where things are so easy that they don't try. No, there's a little bit of trying that's implied by it, but they have enough supportive aspects for when they try, it just seems to work out relatively easily. They have to try, but they don't have to try hard.
Yeah, the mystic rectangle will often be like that person is going to be pulled towards a particular passion in their life or cause or area that they really feel like their talents are particularly suited for.
Yeah. I happen to have quite a few talents, so that creates a weird little thing for me. But it's nice. It's a very positive aspect pattern. I like it. I'm a big fan of it. I have a mystic rectangle.
So we have before we get into yads, we have a little bit of a disclaimer. This is where we're not going to fight this time. We have different opinions over whether or not you can include like the points in the chart, like the ascendant, the midheaven, the descendant, or the IC as part of a yod, or really any aspect pattern.
Yeah, in a natal chart, I wouldn't really take into account the angles as much. But so the yod is by far the most famous aspect pattern. It is also one of the most difficult aspect patterns, but it gets a lot of attention because of it. A yod is it's called the finger of the finger of fate, finger of destiny, the finger of God.
So yod is actually a Hebrew letter, which is that's where the name comes from. So real quick, wasn't going to argue, Mike, but I did want to stress what our difference opinion is, just so people can go and do their own research. Like, we're not gonna argued before because
there's a lot of rules placed on what is and what is not a yod.
Right, and I don't feel that a yod is using those points, because I feel like, well, you can use fucking midpoints to make a yod. You can make anything into a yod.
Before we even get into that, don't we need to explain what a yod is?
Okay, yes, but I'm just meaning in all aspect patterns. For me, I use planets, I'll use the North Node, that's it. You can do whatever you want to do, but just go fucking research it. Don't do what you're doing just because somebody told you to do it like a moron, okay? Like, go look it up, go buy some actual books. Don't just, go get on some...
It's not just about buying some damn books and believing whatever a book tells you, because all astrologers have different points of view related to the subject. It's all about what you notice and what research, your observations. Just do your research and pay attention to what you see in a chart and how it manifests in life.
Okay.
So
I love you, Mike.
A yod is an isosceles triangle. What?
I said I love you, Mike. Are we gonna?
I love you too, but we gotta get we've got to lay down the framework for how to interpret a yod. So a yod is 3 planets that make an isosceles triangle. It is 3 planets, sometimes points, sometimes asteroids, depending on how you want to interpret it. Usually, it's usually going to be 3 planets. 2 planets that are forming the base of the yod are forming a sextile aspect to each other. And then there is 1 planet at the apex, the top of the triangle, that is forming an inconjunct aspect to both of the planets at the base. And so what that does is the 2 planets at the bottom, they strengthen each other via the sextile aspect and then focus the energies of those planets onto the apex planet like a laser beam. And it's pushing the individual who holds the yod towards realizing some sort of karmic destiny that is explained by the position of the apex planet and the house.
Do you know why I'm laughing right now? Is
Why?
because I'm the one who keeps shit on track. And when I go off on my little tangent, then you're like, you start talking really loud and really fast, and you're like, you act like you're the one who does that. Don't take my job from me, okay? I'm the serious one.
Did I not just explain a yod though?
You did very, very loudly and very succinctly. You did. Okay. The apex planet is the most important part of figuring your yod out. If you want to figure out what to do with it. And every time a transit hits, by the way, one of these planets in your yod, it's going to make you feel like, what is happening in my life? It's going to be some crisis. People with yods seem like they have some crazy crap going on all the time because stuff is always transiting it and it always is hitting that yod. It's always activating that yod.
Yeah, and those people, they tend to have this sense of life, this sense of being directed towards a singular purpose. There is like they're being pushed towards something. It's difficult to deal with because these people are going to have to realize they're going to have to realize something, and they're going to be pushed towards it like kicking and screaming, because inconjunct aspects, those little green lines that form the two longer sides of the isosceles triangle, are very difficult aspects, and they're very, very felt.
Yes, it seems like an irresolvable situation. And let me just go ahead and say this, because we are dealing with an inconjunct, which is a minor aspect, do not push your orbs past 3 degrees for a yod.
Yeah. Astro theme will try to tell you that, Astro theme tried to tell me I had a fucking yod.
It gives everybody a goddamn yod. That's why I get so irritated. Okay, so we had planned on making this episode anyway, and then there was a Facebook post about yods, and everybody's posting all their yods from Astro
theme. I
And
have 3 yods.
yes, I saw that. I'm like, how can you have 3 yods? Like, how? How did that make that up?
It's the apex point. The apex point is the asteroid Karma, and it's in the 17th house.
My yod is between the midheaven and my pussy and the sky. Okay, so Kite orbs.
Her pussy is so fine when you throw it up in the air, it turns into sunshine.
Oh yeah, Harlem Nights. Woo! That's a movie. That's a throwback right there. That's why they call her Sunshine. Okay, so this yod is going to create a series of little crises in this person's life, and it is propelling them towards a fated kind of, I don't know.
Albert Einstein had a yod.
Fate. Yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many amazingly brilliant, successful, famous people, but that had difficult lives. Difficult lives with yods. So, like I said, the apex point is the point that both of the inconjuncts are pointing to. That's going to be kind of the solution, the way out, the answer, the focal point. So tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, what?
Tell us how that works, that focal point in a yod. How do you use it?
How do you use it? You look at what the planet is, what the planet means, and what house it falls in, and you just legitimately focus on embracing that area of life and embracing the qualities of that planet and the house that it's in. But you don't really have to. There's no algorithm for solving a yod. You're going to get pushed towards it regardless. I mean, you can study it to figure out what the fuck you're in for, but trust me, you're going towards that point. Like, you're getting pushed towards that apex, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you even study astrology or not, it's going to be, it's gonna happen.
So I'm going to talk about.
It kind of sucks though, because you don't have much of a choice.
So I'm going to talk about a particular person. I won't say who it is because they do listen to the podcast, but I'll kind of describe their placements a little bit, and they'll probably realize, hopefully, that I'm talking about them, and then this will help everybody else learn about a yod. This is a pretty simple example of a yod. So they have, this is a Leo person that I know, and they have a rising Libra, and their moon is in Sagittarius. They love to travel. Like that moon in Sag is all about, exploring the world, but it's also in the third house, so travel. Anyway, their yod is Venus in the 12th house. It's retrograde. That's a whole nother video. Mike, actually, instead of us doing a podcast, go check out Mike's Venus in retrograde video. That is excellent, really, really helpful, on his Astro YouTube channel. And then I don't even have to get into it. But this person's yod is Venus is sextiling Mars, and then the apex of the yod is Saturn in the 7th. So this is somebody who, yeah, and Saturn in retrograde too. This is a person who, while they always are in a relationship, I would even probably call it serial monogamous, but they have been married for like 20 years. And being faithful or being settled, feeling comfortable in the relationships has been a challenge. Expressing their feelings has been a challenge. But that's also because Venus is retrograde in the 12th house. But that is part of the basis for this yod. Usually you think, oh, Venus sextiling Mars, beautiful. They have no problem with relationships. But it's part of this yod. And because the apex is Saturn in the 7th. So first of all, Saturn in the 7th usually is, I've noticed a lot of people, they have older spouses. But Saturn in the 7th is telling them to take responsibility in their relationships, to be loyal, to be faithful, to have those Saturn-like qualities of taking those lessons and being responsible, being the partner that they're supposed to be. So that's how this yod works for this person.
Now check this out. Okay, so if you see the apex planet conjunct a particular asteroid or a fixed star, you can it's not, of course, the fixed star or the asteroid will not be the apex on its own. But
Right.
if there is a personal planet conjuncted, it can definitely color the interpretation quite a bit.
Yes.
So there is one notable case that I noticed. I drew out a natal chart for an individual that I was incarcerated with. I actually got all his birth information. I had somebody on the outside calculate the ascendant, and then I drew out the chart myself using the coordinates. And he had a yod from, okay, so it's the craziest thing ever. Pluto and Neptune were forming sextiles, and they were both making an inconjunct aspect to the moon in Gemini, conjunct Aldebaran. Exactly.
Good God.
Well, the thing about this particular individual is he was very good looking and very attractive. I'm not saying I thought he was hot. I'm just saying, like, this is just how he was. He had this kind of way about him. But he had this problem where he was very, very good looking and very well spoken and came from a very wealthy family, but he had a history of hitting women, of getting in trouble for, like, he hit one of his girlfriends so hard he collapsed her lung.
Jesus.
And if you look at the nature of Aldebaran and what Aldebaran does, it makes somebody very, like John F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy Jr., they both had a personal planet conjunct Aldebaran exactly. And what it does is there is an innate charisma, an ability to be very charming, but there tends to be a propensity for finding a violent death. And so the fact that the moon was exactly conjunct Aldebaran and it was the point of the yod showed me that this person, very likely, their fate is to not meet a very pleasant end. And it's probably due to the fact that he had this thing where he would, like, in a narcissistic way, he would draw people in and then abuse them horribly, mostly women. So, just saying.
Yeah.
So it can actually point to something really bad. It just depends on other factors at play. So yods can push you towards something really good, but if there's certain fixed stars that if the apex is sitting right on top of that fixed star, it can definitely color the destiny a little bit, and sometimes you might not like what you see.
Yeah. So you can get more complicated with aspect patterns. And so one thing you brought up, a point in my head, is that a lot of times when you see an aspect pattern, the planets involved in it will conjunct other planets. So when that happens, how you need to study this, break it down, figure it out, is first blend those planets that are conjunct. So if you have, Pluto at one part of the, making an aspect pattern, but it's conjunct Venus, but Pluto's the one that's forming more of the exact aspect, right? First, you need to sit there and figure out, how does Venus and Pluto conjunct operate, and blend that together and incorporate that into your aspect pattern interpretation, because those are definitely going to make a difference.
Yes.
Okay.
It is definitely going to color it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So.
Shades of gray, people. Shades of gray.
Yeah, they're very important. So these aspect patterns as a whole, it's a very potent thing to keep, pay attention to, because the big picture is important. I mean, I know Miss Brittany here with her little Virgo rising wants to sit and break everything down bit for bit for bit for bit for bit, which is a good thing to do, but you can't miss the forest for the trees. So you have to take a look at the big picture overall. And actually, Brittany is very good at that. She has her Mercury in Sagittarius and all that good stuff. So.
When Brittany gives you a chart reading, she will start with the outline, the themes, then I will give you the details, okay? So you will still get a chart reading that is both, it's both like, here's the big major themes, and then here's the comprehensive stuff that's kind of filling in the blanks. One thing lastly that I want to say, and this isn't really about aspect patterns, but this is about looking at the big picture of a chart, which is sort of our theme for this episode, is your chart angles. We've talked a little bit in the past about planets, whether they're in like an angular house. But what I really want people to take home, when you first pull up a chart, look at any planets that are conjunct an angle. That is a big part of your big picture. That is a huge part of your big picture. If somebody's got a planet sitting on their ascendant, that is going to be a huge deal.
Yeah, if it's Mars, good God.
I have a girl I work with who's that way. She's actually, it's funny because she's really nice, and then she'll like rant about shit later. But like
I know this guy that has Mars conjunct the ascendant and Virgo, and he held the door. We went out to eat one day, and we went outside to go smoke, and he held the door open for this other dude who was walking out, and the guy didn't say thank you for him holding the door open, and so he chased him down in the parking lot, started cussing him out, and started a fight right there in front of the restaurant.
Jesus. Oh, man, that's a lot of drama. So yeah, check out those planets on the angles. If you see any, you need to realize that's going to be a blatant part of that person's personality. So that wraps it up for us, yeah?
Yep. So make sure you check out our podcast, obviously. I mean, you're obviously checking it out now. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, and then Podbean, of course. And then also, I have my own YouTube channel, which I'd like Brittany to start collaborating with me more on, but either way, I have lots of good content I keep adding regularly. It's AT Astro on YouTube. So...
And you can always email us with your questions and for consultations at outrageastrology@gmail.com. When you are listening to this podcast, please just go ahead and subscribe to it so that you will know when we have new content out. We do release an episode every week.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Until next time, guys. I'm Mike.
And I'm Brittany. Thanks for listening.